So it feels very great to say this. Welcome back to Chainsaw Man Part 2. It's been quite some time, but this chapter wholeheartedly delivered in the most crazy Fujimoto style way that you can actually imagine. If you had any sort of concerns or worries, no more. Completely washed away with this chapter as it just felt right. It felt perfect. On top of it, it's honestly pretty heartwarming to see such positive and viral reception on Twitter and social media in general towards this chapter. I think just based on all of the one-shots we got from Fujimoto, there was a sense of anxiety or nervousness that he held for Chainsaw Man Part 2 and for himself, thinking that people potentially wouldn't like or enjoy what the second part of the story would provide. I hope he's able to see the impact of Chainsaw Man as well as the launch of Part 2 has had on social media in general and just the overall presence it's garnered. It's beautiful. I couldn't be more happy for him. Very typical of Fujimoto, this chapter is a little bit different. Normally you would think that, hey, maybe we would follow Denji a little bit more or see what he's up to nowadays, but instead we don't get Denji at all. We don't see him. We actually get introduced to a brand new character who is most likely going to be one of our star pillars for this story, a protagonist, antagonist, however you want to flip around it. Either way, they're going to be very important and play a central role in conflicting, but also being a comparison to Denji himself. This is Asa Mitaka, someone whose parents were unfortunately killed by devils. So rightfully, she doesn't feel all too great about devils, but her classroom is trying to integrate a devil chicken called Bucky. And originally it's kind of penned as a project to teach how precious life is. And they kind of go through the motion over 3 odd months to understand Bucky. And by the end of it, instead of actually killing and eating Bucky, which was the original project, they decide to spare Bucky and keep him alive because he's not a devil, he's not a human, but he's a friend. And Asa feels a little bit weird about this. She doesn't really have many friends. She's very pushed to the side. Not many people acknowledge or recognize her. She keeps to herself and she hates seeing the positive or happiness that comes through other classmates, seeing people with friends or relationship, even stuff that she doesn't have. So she tends to keep to herself. But Bucky actually manages to pull her out of her shell just a little bit, not only just by remembering and acknowledging her name, which not many people do, but also feeling very welcoming. Bucky's a very lovable, charismatic individual. And as she slowly takes these steps to open up her shell just a little bit to allow people to come in, it just as quickly disappears and crushes quite literally within her hands. As she's walking over to play soccer with everyone within her classroom, with Bucky kind of initiating this whole thing, she trips and falls and lands on Bucky and crushes him, kills him. And just as quickly as she slowly started to open up, thanks to Bucky, it has now all come crumbling down on top of her as she's seen as this big, bad, hideous person. Someone that quite literally killed their friend. Obviously, this doesn't have a great effect on Asa, and very quickly she closes off her shell once again, and you can see this just by the way she acts, the emotion that she brings. She knew instantly that any sort of progress that was being made is completely gone, and people are going to see her as a monster. She's already by herself, so she runs back to that comfortable position. She's not a heartless individual. She feels insanely guilty and just very emotionally overloaded by the whole situation and just unsure of how to proceed further within a normal school life. She was already isolated, now it's going to be potentially even worse. But 2 people rock up at her house, the teacher of her class as well as the president, who she's somewhat loose friends with, and they convince her to go to Bucky's grave. While they go on this walk together, very quickly things get crazy. They get wild. The president turns into the justice devil and is absolutely repulsed or disgusted by the actions Asa has taken. So that comes as a surprise. President is quite literally spewing this type of monologue about herself and how she's sleeping with the teacher, but how the teacher doesn't really care about the president, but actually cares about Asa, which obviously is kind of ironic. Justice Devil, everything kind of just goes AWOL. Asa dies. She gets killed by the president, but within her moment of death, very similar to Denji, a very odd creature appears, a bird, and he offers to help her, that if she wants to live, this devil has to take over her body. Very quickly, she is reborn, and we find out the devil is actually the War Devil. So in great Fujimoto fashion, we have the War Devil that is now within Asa going up against the Justice Devil. Quite fitting. And then we see pure chaoticness push from there. The teacher's spine gets ripped out and used as a sword by the War Devil, and then completely obliterates the Justice Devil. Obviously, Asa's personality is different. It seems like the War Devil has fully taken over her body and is more so very interested in Denji, or Chainsaw Man, and wants to hunt him down and kill him. And that brings a conclusion to our chapter. So a nice little simple overview. There's a lot within here, a lot to unpack, a lot to kind of dissect. First and foremost, this chapter is kind of almost identical to Denji's first chapter. Not only are the chapter titles the same, with Denji's being Dog and Chainsaw and then Asa's being Bird and War, but also the actual design of the chapter itself is very similar. You get introduced to our new character, you see how isolated they usually are, and they kind of go through this method of realization and wants and dreams and selfishness, but not being able to achieve it, and there's a lot of hardship within there, thus ultimately reaching this climatic point of death and rebirth, born anew in some way, shape or form, which in Denji's case is obviously into the Chainsaw Man Devil, and Asa's is the War Devil. There's a lot of panel work that's basically interchangeable, but the whole design philosophy of the chapter itself is one-to-one, which I think is very brilliant and a beautiful way to introduce a brand new main character for our story, especially when you know that these two individuals are going to coexist with one another. They're going to conflict, they're going to contrast and really pull apart, but also combine their characters beautifully in some way, shape or form. Here's a fun fact. Asa means healer in Hebrew, I believe, and Mitaka, the rest of her name, means hawk. The name of the chapter is Bird and War, which brings a little emphasis to the name Asa. But what does a healer have to do with anything? Well, if she is the character that potentially she could be, which is a love interest to Denji, do you see the confliction and the contrast between both of them? Something that Denji has always wanted is a family, is love, is affection, and he's had it all kind of ripped away from him, so he's building up from scratch. Now he's getting a celebrity type of affection currently because we see the impact that he's had on society. There's merchandise for him now, but I assume he's missing that personal connection, the love that he wants, something that's more intimate for himself and not the personal family dynamic that he may have with Nayuta. Asa fits that role. In a sense, if they become companions, friendship, potentially even lovers, that is a healing point for Denji, but it also provides a healing point for Asa. She's never had friends. She wants to live selfishly. She wants to have a boyfriend. It may even provide a bit of a family for her, considering she's on her own. So they complete each other rather perfectly, but also their devils conflict, which is the sad reality of the situation. So on the surface, both humans might fall in love and they feel rather fulfilling and perfect for one another because they could potentially even go to the same school or just happen to meet each other in school. But the War Devil ultimately wants to kill the Chainsaw Devil. To me, this relationship that can be built sounds very compelling, very beautiful, very tragic, just complicated to say the least. And knowing how Fujimoto likes to handle his characters, this kind of sounds right up his alley. However, the bigger question, what is the War Devil? Honestly, at this point in time, I would say that this is a horseman of the apocalypse, one that Makima herself actually mentioned, which was hunger, death, and war. What's funny about that one Makima panel when she mentions the horsemen is that she only mentions 3. It is the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So what is the 4th one? And throughout the entirety of Chainsaw Man, a lot of us were led to believe that Makima is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, control, or more fittingly, conquest. The interpretation or the translation for what the horsemen titles are is very interchangeable, depending on language, depending on perspective, and the whole idea behind it. If it wasn't Makima, I think it'd be perfect for the control or conquest horseman to be controlling her. Quite fitting. Now, if that is the case, this War Devil theoretically should be a horseman of the apocalypse. It also leads us down a very specific train of thought where the horsemen may not be able to survive on their own. And when I say survive, I also mean function. I'm thinking along the lines of the horsemen have to function through hybrids. That's the only way that they can exist. This War Devil appeared as a bird. Pochita, not being a horseman but someone very pinnacle within the world, appeared as a small dog. Yet their power is utilized so efficiently and perfectly through humans. It's almost like they have to coexist and they have to merge with humans to bring out their full potential. I think this would work really well with the horsemen because they can't go around controlling everything that they see fit because of their power, and are quite literally gated by the fact that they have to coexist with a human and they have to merge with a human. If that is the case, Makima could easily be one of them, and now Asa is one of them. In terms of tiering powers as well, I feel like it makes a lot of sense because of the primordial fears not having to do anything with humans and just being these anomalies or entities that exist that are insanely powerful. The primordial fears are something else in their entirety. polarity. So when you kind of scale the powers or the devils, they theoretically would be at the top, but right below the four horsemen. But it could actually be the other way, which if you blow it up even further, law of nature, etc., the rawest form of nature is usually the scariest, primordial fears. Stuff that is quite literally just a being or entity that is insanely powerful. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, also very powerful, but are restricted to only being accessible to their fullest form through humans, because they're kind of a byproduct of humans. There's a lot you could extrapolate that further, but that's the general line of thought process I'm going with currently, just to fill in the blanks for people that might be a little bit confused. Overall, there's a lot of beautiful stuff within this chapter. It just oozes that Fujimoto-esque appeal that we all know and love, in a way that works entirely for himself. We get introduced to a brand new character, some beautiful new concepts, the whole appeal and design and the chaoticness that he has going for it is just impeccable. It's everything that you could want from a first chapter, but where the story goes now is anyone's guess. Of course, we can take bits and pieces from this chapter and blow it up even further, theory crafting, explanation, analyzing, etc. It's all fun, it's all enjoyable. But using Fujimoto's own words, just read the manga, just enjoy what you get and try not to kind of give yourself an expectation that can't be met. It's fine to do all of these things, but don't let it control your expectation or your hype or excitement for stuff that is building in your own head. Be happy within the now, enjoy the chapter, what it does, what it gives to you, and how you overall digest it. But at the end of the day, I too just really want to enjoy it and speak about more of the bigger or obvious things that are glaring in the chapter, if that makes sense. I love this chapter. I thought it was brilliant. I'm very excited to see where Fujimoto wants to take his story, how he wants to play on Asa as a character, and how eventually she will intertwine with Denji's life, with how they clash and conflict and become something very beautiful. I wish Fujimoto the best. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the chapter. What were your favorite moments? What were some things you picked up on? How do you feel about Asa, and what do you think is going to go with Denji? Let me know in the comment section below. But with that, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water, and I'll see you within the next one. Goodbye.